All right. Today is Trans Day of Visibility. Very cool. Um, so today we're talking about the joy and agony of being trans. This is something I've been thinking a lot about recently. I had a pretty good therapy session a couple weeks ago talking about my dysphoria, and it's been good because it's something I've been putting off for a while. But on the other hand, it's just as painful as it was before. So I'm 24, and I've been out as trans since I was 15. So that's 9 years, if I'm doing my math right. And there was always signs. I remember when I was in preschool, they at like recess or whatever, you could play inside if you wanted, and they had a bunch of outfits and pieces you could put on, and I would always wear like skirts and stuff and like dresses, and it didn't click with me. I didn't know what being trans was until I was like a lot older, but I've always felt dysphoria and I couldn't quite place it until I got older. But I had always felt like something was wrong. I always hated my name too. Um, like even if I wasn't trans, I still wouldn't like my name. You know what I mean? But I always felt very uncomfortable in my own skin, and it wasn't until I hit puberty that it really started bothering me. Um, I remember one time, and I was like 14, let's say. I remember it was like late at night and I was like walking past the coat rack and I saw one of my mom's jackets and I was like, damn, I wish I was a girl so I could wear pretty stuff like that. Didn't think of anything at the time, didn't mean anything. And then there was a lot of examples like that. Um, but it was just like really interesting stuff that like I remember trying on bras just for fun, Um, and obviously that meant nothing, of course. That was when I was like really little. Um, I don't know. It's very interesting to think about. But making that transition from thinking everything's normal to maybe messing with your gender is scary. And I was out as trans from like 15 to like 21, and then I had a really weird combination of events where I went to a party and someone gave me DMT without me knowing, and I freaked the fuck out and had like I don't know what it's called. It's like persistent something. I don't know. It's like a like where the hallucinogen drugs last in your system for a lot longer. I'm also schizophrenic, so it put me into psychosis. And like a couple days after that, one of my best friends committed suicide, and that like destroyed me fundamentally. And I like detransitioned because I couldn't handle the stress. I like shaved my head, grew my facial hair out, started wearing male clothes again, used a different name, all this kind of stuff. I got a lot of piercings. I got my lips pierced, my nose pierced, my bridge pierced, and my eyebrow pierced. And it was a weird way of me dealing with dysphoria by like disfiguring myself till I was unrecognizable. And and it helped with the dysphoria, and like it because it distracted me from the pain of my real life going on. But I obviously came back to being trans again. Like I never really felt like I detransitioned. I technically was like non-binary male or like mask presenting. So I was still like under the umbrella of trans, but for all intents and purposes I detransitioned. But it was a very easy decision the second time I got to make it to transition again. And this time I'm going harder than ever because like before I just did enough to survive, but now I try to be I'm trans maxing. You know what I mean? I'm going as hard as possible, and I'm not done yet. I'm nowhere near where I want to be. I decided I want to start taking estrogen. It's difficult where I live because you can't get it on Medicaid, so I have to pay out of pocket. But I did the math on it, and I spend as much in 1 month on vaping as I would for like 3 months of estrogen. So if I quit vaping, which you should anyways, because nicotine lowers the effects of estrogen, that would be good. So that would make me a lot happier. Um, I also have been really debating on bottom surgery. I don't know if I'm happy with like any set of genitals though. I don't know, but if I had to pick, I would definitely pick to do the surgery. A lot of modern discourse with being trans is the definition of like to be trans is to have dysphoria. But I am a supporter of if it would give you more euphoria to transition, then you should. If you want to. Because for me now it's less about dysphoria and more about maximizing euphoria. Um I plan on moving to the city next to me. It's like an hour away and it's in a different state, but it's very close by. I used to visit there all the time. Uh, Unfortunately, I don't have a car anymore. I'm working on that. So I can't drive there anymore. But there's a trans group. There's like 500 people in it at this point. Um, and I met a lot of really nice people, and it was extremely comforting to have a trans community. There would be meetups like twice a month, and then like extras on top of that. And it was so nice to just see all types of trans people, trans masks, trans femmes, non-binary, and everything in between and outside that, like everybody. And it was awesome. And I met a lot of nice people, a lot of weird people, a lot of mean people. But I mean, like it was a full breadth of life, and that was amazing. So, what are the joys of being trans? Well, I guess let's start with the agony. Let's start with the agony. First off, most people transition because of dysphoria. And that can be horrifying. It's truly a hellish experience being trapped in a body that you don't feel is yours. You know what I mean? I struggle with that immensely. I wrote a diary entry or a journal entry talking about how I feel like a werewolf with this my facial hair and body hair and this voice, and I feel lycanthropic, and I've decided to become a puppy girl, and I'm working towards that as a way to defang myself and allow myself to be pretty, still feeling inhumane, but connecting with humanity nonetheless. I think we all know how it feels, you know? But I think one of the joys of being trans is that you get to experience life in such a full way, in a more conscious way than people would ever experience normally. And you get to craft an identity. You get to become who you want to be, not just end up as something, just a product of your environment, but you get to fully flesh out exactly who you want to be. And I think that is an incredible journey. I think about this quote where it's like, if God didn't make the seed, then how would we experience the joy of growing it and turning it into wheat and turning that wheat into bread? And in the same way, we as trans people get the joy of creating ourselves. In a way, we're our own gods. And I think that's beautiful. And I think we as trans people get to experience life in a completely unique perspective. And times are hard and always have been for us throughout history, but things are still better than they've ever been, and I think that's wonderful. And one of the biggest things, I touched on this a little bit earlier, but is community. I've never met a more tight-knit community than when I was involved in the trans group that I was in. It was absolutely wonderful, and I encourage you to, try to search for local groups and stuff. The state I'm in is a red state, very Republican, very nasty. In theory, in practice, it's actually pretty nice, but I still want to get out of here. But there are groups, even in a place like this where it seems like a wasteland, you can still find people. And I encourage you to go out in person as well. That's so important to have human connection face to face. So, even if you don't have access to that, there's still Discord groups you can join. I'm sure there's a Discord group for your local state or somewhere nearby that you can get to, or maybe just a general online one. I think location based is best though. It gives you more sense of community. But I think a lot about. I deal with a lot of weird mental stuff. Like I mentioned, I have schizophrenia, and I also have DID, multiple personality disorder, is what they used to call it. And a lot of my time has been spent trying to create a version of myself, a way I can view myself that is positive. And I used to, before I was on medication, I'd have a lot of like delusions and hallucinations of like God talking to me, and he always encouraged me to transition. And I was trans before this, but this was like during my like really bad days when I was like a young teenager, young adult. But he said that it was like a holy experience. It was angelic to transition, and I think about that a lot now that I'm on medication and I've calmed down over the years, but I wish I still had that fervor. And in a way I do, but it's everything's so boring and normal now that I'm like sane. But I had a lot of passion and self-love because I felt like I was doing the right thing, and now it's very difficult. I have a lot of deceivers in my ear, telling me to detransition, don't take estrogen, just like make life easy for yourself. But I think the day is intense. It's not going to be easy no matter what I do, so I might as well do what makes me happy, and I encourage you to do that too. You know, there's a lot of people who would try to veer you off your path, but, they're more lost than you could ever be. And you got to remember who you're listening to. Do you like my makeup today? I started doing makeup a couple weeks ago. Look, I'm going to be so honest. The eyelids are fucked. I didn't care. I didn't give a shit. I did the wings in one try, though. That was sick. Been doing alright on that. Um, I think one of the really interesting things about being trans is that it galvanizes you towards all of the hostilities of life. At least in my experience, when I was in high school, I was harassed a lot. Before I came out, I had like a mohawk and I wore like punk clothes and stuff like that. And people made fun of me for that, gave me shit all the time. But that prepared me for when I became trans because I got harassed so bad. By teachers, by classmates, people on the street throwing garbage at me, people at Walmart and shit. But at some point I realized that all of that was just like getting afraid of like a dog barking at you behind a fence. You know what I mean? It's like they really can't do anything. They can't touch you, you know? Like they can bark all they want, but like they're fenced in. They can't touch you. So you get to walk with grace and be your authentic self while they're trapped in their own little mind prison, because Fox News said so or whatever. And in a way, you get to move through life with more agency, more freedom than anyone cis would get to. Because when you transition, there's always the choice to follow the gender norms of whatever you're transitioning from into. Weird way to phrase that, but you get my point. Or you can choose to defy that. There's a lot of utility for someone who's afraid to adhere to gender norms, and there's a lot of freedom for people who are truly about this shit to break them and be, an object that defies all logic. You know what I mean? I'm getting a little esoteric in this shit. My point is that it's like when you truly unlock your inner self, nothing can stop you from being who you are. And sometimes that is so defiant towards what society expects out of you that it's absolutely groundbreaking. And I think that's wonderful. I think about this quote from Death Grips quite a bit, where they say you got to be the freak you want to see. And I think about that a lot because, we see really cool people out there and you're like, damn, I wish I could be them. But it's like, imagine if you were who you wanted to be in the world. Like you put out what you want to see, you know what I mean? That's true excellence, that's true beauty. I think at the core of it, there's an immense amount of joy for as much agony as you go through. I mean, it outweighs everything. If you're watching this and you're questioning your gender, or you're newly trans, or even if you're old trans, like I'm not old trans, I've only been out for a decade, but that's a decent chunk of my life. But I've been around the block a couple times. There's nothing hurting you from experimenting. Nothing's permanent. Nothing's that serious. Nothing's that serious, is it? I'm really happy I'm trans, though. I wouldn't trade it for anything. It's such a joy. I think if I had stayed male, I would still feel dysphoria, but I would always wonder what it would be like. There was this lady I met in the trans group who is in her 70s, and she only transitioned like a year or two ago, probably 2 years at this point. And she has a lot of regret because she felt trapped her entire life, and she feels like she's wasted so much time. And it's really unfortunate because her generation is not generally hip on being trans. So her wife doesn't approve, her friends don't approve. You know, the only safe space she has is at these events, these trans group events. And that sickens me that the world is still so cruel to people. You know, I mean, you know, I call her my grandma and stuff, and she's kind of the grandma to all the young trans people, you know. And she's been so sweet to me. She's a wonderful lady. My point is, it's never too late, but the sooner you get the ball rolling, the better. It's so important. And I mean, even if you're cis, I think it's important to explore yourself and get as deep as possible into your inner psyche. You know? I've been thinking about making music again. I haven't made music in a couple months. Well, that's not true. I made a song. I made 2 songs. Like I said, I don't know. I haven't been as prolific because I used to make music multiple times a week at least. And I could never quite make a song that I really felt expressed how I felt. I made one EP called 222 AM. And the first song on that really hits the head, and I love that in retrospect. You know, my production skills gotten a lot better over time, but I don't know. I only recently started doing vocals. I haven't released anything yet with vocals, but I have one song that I do want to release. I have one song that someone produced, and they gave me the go ahead to sing on it, but I just haven't been feeling it, you know. I've just been kind of surviving. You know, it's been really intense for me this last year, year and a half ish. You know, my whole life got torn to bits. Everything fell apart, but I'm coming back stronger than ever. You know, I was talking about in the last video. Got some job opportunities. Well, I got the second interview for one place I wanted to work at. It's a hair place, like a beauty supply shop. You know, and they're gonna be contacting me sometime this week, which is awesome. So I'm excited for that because once I get this job, then I can save up for a car, then I can save up to move out. You know, and the cool part is that there's lots of trans people who are always looking for housing, so I'm gonna be able to have trans roommates. And that's pretty sick. I'm really excited for that. Um, but yeah, you know, there's been a lot of really agonizing times. Like when I first came out as trans, the dysphoria was so fucking bad that I attempted suicide multiple times, like about 6 times, and I thought about committing suicide every day. For since I was 12 till about 22. Um, but I stopped doing that once I came out as trans again for the second time, like trans femme. You know, I committed to this, you know, because I think the world is a better place with me in it, and I think it's better because I'm trans. Um, yeah. I think that's about all I gotta say. I had a lot more I wanted to talk about, but I just don't have the energy in me today. But if you made it to the end of the video, I appreciate you. Feel free to leave a like or a dislike if you liked or disliked the video. Leave a comment, you know, telling me how you're doing, how your transition's going. Happy Trans Day of Visibility. And that's about it. I'll see you next week. Bye.